Welcome to the Collide Kids podcast, hosted by Christen Clark. This is a show for kids and families. You are going to meet new people and have fun while you listen. Let's do it!
Hey y'all, welcome to the Collide Kids podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Christen Clark. The Collide Kids podcast is a show for kids and families where we learn together how life and faith collide. If this is your first time listening to the Collide Kids podcast, welcome! I'm so glad you're listening today. Hey, be sure to stick around to the end for our kids only segment. That's where kids just like you get to be on the podcast. Well, I've noticed in the past few episodes that I have talked with some of my guests about being an extrovert or an introvert. Do you know what that is? Do you know what that means? Do you know what you are? Are you an extrovert or are you an introvert? Well, if you don't know what that means, get ready because you're about to learn all about the differences between the two and what is great about both. And we're actually going to talk a lot more today about introverts and about people that might be shy. Have you ever met someone that's shy? Are you shy? I've actually always loved learning about different personality types and how people think and react to different situations. So I think it's really important to know these things about ourselves and also to learn new things about other people. Well, I'm really excited to get into this discussion today with my guest, and her name is Brittany Hochstaetter. She has been a communications professor for over a decade at various schools like Liberty University and Cedarville University. She's a wife and mom of two, and she has lived in West Virginia, North Carolina, Ohio, and Florida. But now she calls Texas her home. She's a published author, speaker, and former children's director. And I love that she told me this. Her favorite candy bar is Hershey's Fast Break, and her favorite board games are Sorry, Payday, and Battleship. I love board games, so I'm with you on that one, Brittany. I'm really excited for you all to learn along with me as we talk today. So here is my conversation with Brittany Hochstaetter. Brittany, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
It is absolutely a pleasure.
I'm so glad you're on the show today. And I would love for you to just introduce yourself. Can you tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes. I am first and foremost a wife and mom. I have been married to my husband, Peter, for 15 years this November. And we have two children. And they are 11 and almost 5. And they are very different in their personality. They might make it into our topic.
Yeah.
And what do I do? Okay. I am paid to talk about talking. That is my job.
Talk about talking?
I am paid. People pay me money to talk about talking. It's like, It's like meta talking. I am a communication professor. So
okay.
I have been a communication professor for 12 years. Woo, it just aged me. And I'm also a former children's director. I'm also a former Christian school teacher. And I'm also a champion of a lot of Christian organizations that I have volunteered with and been a part of through the years. For instance, INCM, International Children's Ministry, they put on a children's pastors conference every year, which is absolutely phenomenal. I have been a speaker for 2 years and a coach for 2 years with them. And they're great community. And I also volunteer with the National Christian Forensics League, and they do speech and debate organizations for Christian kids that are homeschooled or in Christian school. And mostly they're Zoom this year, but I help judge those competitions since I've been a public speaking teacher. And mostly, I didn't say where, I'm a communication professor full-time for community college. Also taught for Cedarville, which was where I got my undergrad degree, Cedarville University in Ohio. And I also currently teach adjunct for Liberty University.
Awesome.
Yes.
That's where I went to school. So that's my alma mater. That's awesome.
Now we share a school too, Christen.
Yes. Let's tell everyone how we know each other.
You tell.
We grew up together, right? So you were a couple grades ahead of me, but we both went to a Christian school in Raleigh, North Carolina, right?
Yeah. Go Bulldogs.
Go Bulldogs. Yeah. Shout out to Wake Christian. And the other thing that's just always in the forefront of my mind is this one thing that we shared. And it was a TV show that you started, right? You started called Teen Scene. Do you remember that?
That is true. You're one of the remaining survivors of that sounds bad. Not survivors like it went to a dark place, but survivors like you remember it. Yes. So I was very blessed to get involved as a volunteer with a local television station that produced Christian content for local access. And so I just kept getting a little bit more involved and a little bit more involved and a little bit more involved. And before you know it, I had come up with a few ideas for the station. And at age 17, I was producing and underwriting and hosting a show that was for teenagers.
Yes. And it was some of my most hilarious and most incredible high school memories come from being a host. I was a co-host with my friend Erin Bauer. Right
because
after
you guys had to take over.
Right. You were leaving for college, right?
I had to go to college. And so at age 17, the baton had to be passed.
Yes.
And
so I'd like to attribute like this podcast, maybe that was birthed from those moments of awkwardly interviewing some very random people. I mean, I interviewed some of my friends. I interviewed some people I didn't know. I interviewed a couple of singers and pastors, and it was pretty crazy. So yeah, that was an interesting memory.
But wasn't it wonderful too that God used that experience? God can put a little seed of an idea into a kid, and if that kid is receptive to listening to God, that kid can inspire other kids. And then they can get involved with stuff that seems like, okay, that's adult world. Like we can't do big things. Those are for adults. And I love that in that moment, God was able to use me to get other kids involved. Mm-hmm. And we talked about some big things. I mean, when we did Teen Scene, we were producing shows during Columbine, during some really big topics. And then you guys might have been on air close to 9/11. Or like maybe leading up to that. So we were struggling with some big things. And this is all before YouTube. This is all before social media and iPhones. So this kind of set up a lot of kids, I think, with the confidence to go out and do bigger things and inspire the next generation.
Yeah. And I appreciate the people, the adults that were there that just let us kind of do whatever we wanted. We just walked in like we owned the place and like, all right, we're here to do our thing. And they just let us. So I appreciate those adults that kind of empowered us to do that. But it was still funny because it was a cable Christian network. And so we used to joke like 12 people from my youth group and my mom would watch. We don't really know how many watched because like YouTube, you couldn't know, who was actually.
There's no way to know. It just went out like, it just went out like a homing pigeon and you just praise Jesus that somebody received it. But, sometimes we did get letters and sometimes you would hear from folks and that was pretty cool. And it led to me being able to write a book when I was 19 for young people that was published. And I was able to take that book on tour and speak to youth groups and youth conferences in 4 different states. So I was able to do a lot of things when I was younger. That seems like a different lifetime.
Yeah, it does. That's awesome. Okay, well, so this is really interesting. I really want to talk some more about this in your story, but we love to always start the show with a joke or something fun. Since this is for kids and families, this is usually my kids' favorite part of the show. So do you have like a joke or something fun you want to share with us?
Yeah, so what I want to talk about today is how we can make being shy a superpower.
Oh, okay.
So my jokes have to do with that.
Okay, I love it.
And they might be a little corny, so get your popcorn ready. What do you call a shy person with a hammer?
A shy person with a hammer. I don't know.
Bashful.
I
That was the
like that.
warm-up. That was the
I like
warm-up.
that.
I like this one better. Why was the little cub so shy when he took off his flip-flops at the beach?
I don't know.
Because he was a little bear.
That's good. I love that. That's so fun. Hey, I love corny jokes. I like dad jokes. I like all kinds of jokes. So those are good. I love that. So tell us a little bit about that. You said shyness is a superpower. I've never heard that before or thought of shyness as being something that was great. So tell us why you think shyness is a superpower. We'll be right back after this. You know, raising kids in the digital age isn't easy, but Bark Technology makes products that help parents keep their kids safe online and in real life. They have an app, a phone, and a home device that lets families set parental controls on their internet-connected devices. I love the app because it helps us manage screen time and blocks websites and apps we want our kids to avoid. It also sends alerts and gives us the ability to monitor texts and social media and even track your child's location. Visit bark.us to learn more about how you can keep your kids safe online. Use the code COLLIDEKIDS to get 15% off your subscription of the Bark app.
I think this really didn't occur to me until I became a mama.
Yeah.
Because I am not so shy, if you haven't picked up on that. I have not met many strangers in my life. If I get into an elevator, I will instantly start conversation, and my husband will give me signals like, let's not, let's just ride this time. So and in school, I would get notes on and this is shout out to Wake Christian. If you're listening from Wake Christian, you might feel a little guilty about this, but on my report cards, there would be notes like, Brittany is very bright. Maybe she should work on the talking. Let's be a little quieter. She does
a lot to say.
She's got so many words. So I didn't relate to being shy. I didn't relate to this way of seeing the world. I am an only child. I'm also the daughter of a pastor. And those two things also shaped how I did life. Mm-hmm. Sunday morning, I had to greet people at church, and there wasn't another kid in the pastor's family who could share that responsibility. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of shaking hands and filling in for jobs at the church that went vacant that Sunday. So I didn't really have an option, even if I was shy. So when I had my first child, Verity, she was not like me. Mm-hmm. She was not like me. She was cautious. She was a little girl who wanted to sort of test the water before she got in. She was shy around strangers. Even people she had met, she really needed to warm up to before she was comfortable having a conversation. And this was difficult for my husband and I. I was much more of an extrovert than he is, but he is not shy. And it would make us feel awkward. Like, come on, say hi.
Yeah.
And then we would get into small talk conversations with strangers, and they would say, "Oh, hi, little girl, you have a lovely dress on today. Mm-hmm. I see you're carrying a balloon. Is it your birthday?" And she would just stare at them like, stranger danger, how dare you talk to me? I would rather you stab me with a fork than answer you. And as a parent, you're looking at the kid like, say something. This is awkward. Mm-hmm. And the stranger's looking at you like, what's wrong with you that your kid can't talk? And it's this weird exchange.
Or you feel like you have to do more. Like, okay, I'll do all the talking and I'll speak for everybody and I understand that. Yeah.
Right. And it's made more difficult, I believe, in broader American culture because
Mm-hmm.
in American culture, we are sort of rugged individualists and we really prize that personality who can get up and give an oral book report and raise their hand the fastest with the fastest answer. And we love group work and we love somebody who's dynamic and powerful and charismatic. And this really is not what is naturally gifted to introverts.
Yeah, that's very true that's kind of built into our schools and our culture.
It's very important for parents and children's directors and people who are in leadership to understand that, God didn't make us all zebras in Africa. There are lions too. There's hippos.
Right.
We're not all the same. And so introverts, if you're not familiar with that term and you're listening, introverts, what that means is there's nothing wrong with you. It means that you get your energy a little bit differently. You need to recharge differently than extroverts. And we could say this, if it's more comfortable, we could say team N versus team X. The N team, they really like to recharge by themselves. They need to play by themselves or color by themselves, maybe watch a movie by themselves, play Legos by themselves, do something imaginative. My daughter loved sticker books, doing things where she was just sort of had some quiet and not a lot of stimulation, not a lot of pressure. Extroverts, the X team, they actually lose energy if they're by themselves too long. And they get sluggish and don't feel like themselves if they're not recharged by being around people and having a lot of stimulation. So they want to go to class. They want to go to co-op. They want to go to Sunday school, go to Awana. They want to go play soccer. They want to go meet those kids on the jungle gym. And so that's how they recharge. And so it really is a focus on energy, and it comes with different sets of strengths.
Yeah, that's a really good way to describe it. And I feel like, like extroverts, they could benefit from some alone time and from some rest time. I think that's actually hard for extrovert because I'm an extrovert. It's hard for me to rest sometimes and be by myself, but it's still a good thing. It's just something I have to work at. Whereas I think introverts, they could also benefit from being in a group or being in a meeting or visiting with a friend, having a play date. So there's benefits to doing both things. How can an introvert really show kindness? Like, how could they overcome that?
Well, I think the word shy is, first of all, kind of unfair because when we hear shy, especially in American culture, we automatically think that's a weakness.
Yeah.
We think, oh, if you're shy, you can't be shy. But shyness usually means that child is being cautious and being thoughtful. And introverts like to generally, not all, but and when I say team N and team X, I am talking generally because this is more like a scale.
Right.
Not every extrovert is like this and not every introvert is like this.
True.
But generally, introverts like to think through what they want to say and have a plan, kind of prepare. And extroverts really prefer to wing it. They like the energy rush they get from figuring it out on the spot. And they're quicker with their words. They can grab words out of the air. Whereas introverts, they're better writers because they think through the impact of their words and they like to edit their words and they understand the impact of their words. Sometimes we say the introverts are word economists because they can say more with less.
Yeah.
And the extroverts, they struggle with editing, with like, okay, I got to pull it back.
Yeah.
So when we say shy, we almost look at it like it's a negative, but we need to start looking at it like it's a positive.
Yeah.
Introverts have certain superpowers that extroverts don't have, like listening. Usually introverts are better at listening.
Yeah.
They usually don't struggle with interrupting because of that listening skill. They usually have. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm interrupting you. I think too, I think we associate shyness with fear, and it's not always fear. That's interesting that you said that. It's about thoughtfulness, that they're just trying to think through what to say with the biggest impact.
So my daughter is an introvert, and she is one of the strongest, most resolute human beings I've ever known.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like fully convinced this kid is going to be maybe a lawyer. I don't know, judge, prosecutor. She has a strong, discerning spirit, and she knows right from wrong. And praise God, she does. But her outward, the introvert part of her, to someone who doesn't understand shyness, it can look like fear.
Yeah.
And that leads to a lot of misconceptions. So I think we have to look deeper with the introverts. Usually there's just so much going on. There's usually just beautiful genius and artistry and creativity and depth of understanding going on. It's just not so apparent. The extroverts, we wear our ideas on our face and our hands and our words, and we just put it all out there because we live in the external.
Mm-hmm.
The introverts live in the internal. So it really takes patience to see that.
Yeah, I love that. You said it was something, it's if it's a superpower, it's definitely a blessing. It's something that God's created us differently. I think that's what I love about learning more about people's personality and things like that, is we're all created differently. So for a person that's an introvert, why should they consider it a superpower?
This is important because introverts always feel like they're compared to extroverts. So they always feel like in school they're being told to be more like extroverts. And so it's important for us to build them up and let them know God created them exactly as they are. God loves them exactly as they are. We accept them and we cherish them. Parents need to be aware of these differences in their kids too. Mm-hmm. One verse that I love for the N team is James 1:19, which says everyone should be quick to listen and slow to speak. If the Bible's telling us we should be quick to listen and slow to speak, he's essentially saying, hey, be more like the N team.
Yeah.
They've got it. Team X, you need to learn from Team N. And that's the only way that this works, is that both types of people really have to learn from each other and rely on the strengths of each other.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too how, like, I have a lot of friends who are extroverts, but I also have a lot of friends that are introverts. So those two personality types, like you said, they kind of need each other so they can learn from each other. What is something that an introvert can learn from their extrovert friends?
An introvert can learn adventure and learning how to let go of work and worry and maybe being overly cautious, because they can be around their extroverted friends who are much better at being in the moment.
Yeah.
And learn to enjoy it a little more. I remember when Verity was 8 years old and we had pulled into a parking space that was next to a handicap parking space. And she was reading very well and learning to love to read everything around her. And so she read the sign that said, handicap parking space, fine $250 if you park in this space without the tag. And because she's very much Team N and more cautious, she was like, Mom, I had no idea. If you park in that space, you have to pay $250. And that space is right next to our space. Like, somebody could easily get this confused by accident, not even on purpose. And she got really worked up in this moment. And she said, I really think it's best if we just mail in the $250 because like ahead of time to cover us in case this happens. And I just thought that is exactly the kind of the cautious nature.
Yeah.
And the extrovert is like, well, that's not going to happen to us. We're fine.
Yeah.
You never had that happen. It's probably never going to happen. And so she and I, even though we're mother-daughter and we're not yet old enough to be in the friendship phase, we have a good time sometimes of me trying to draw her out of worries and into fun. And she does a great job for me of when we walk out of Target and I have lost my car again. I was talking the whole time from the car to the door, either on my phone or to her, or just thinking of what I need to not forget inside. Right. I don't know where my car is. And she will always know where the car is. So we do a good job of relying on each other's strengths.
Yeah, that's so funny. I think that I love that idea. And I love the idea of it being a superpower. If you think about superheroes, they all had some kind of weakness and they all kind of considered their main strength their weakness. So to think about the thing that probably bothers us about ourselves, the thing we wish we could overcome or work on, that's actually something that God really wants to use in us.
Yes. A couple things I want to say from what you said. One is I wanted to share a quote from a book authored by Susan Cain, who has written a book called Quiet Power, The Secret Strengths of Introverted Kids. And she says, everyone shines given the right lighting. For some, it's a Broadway spotlight, and for others, it's a lamp-lit desk. And I think that's true regardless of what kind of kid you are. It's incumbent on us to figure out what are the superpowers that our kids have, and how can we as parents and leaders and children's directors try to give them the best lighting that they need to shine, because nobody can do what this kid was put on the earth to do.
Yeah.
They're super because they're bearing the image of God. One thing I wanted to share was a few verses that if you are listening and you are a kid, that you have a Bible memory verse plan, or you're a parent and you've got a Bible memory verse plan or a devotional time and you want some verses to meditate on and write down. Some people like to journal or color or decorate their rooms with verses. These are a couple of verses I think are particularly good for the end teen. The first one is 1 Peter 3:15, which is, be ready always to give an answer to every man who asks you a reason for the hope that is in you. I like that verse because it's a challenge to introverts.
Yeah.
But it also speaks to their strength. They like to be ready with their answers. They like to prepare their answers. And so I like how scripture phrases that.
Yeah.
That we can actually think through what we want to say before we say it. And in that way, exhibit self-control, a fruit of the Spirit in our communication.
I love that.
Another verse is Hebrews 13:2, which is show hospitality to strangers.
Wow.
And that one might feel a little bit harsh for the introverts listening. They might like, well, that's like a suggestive verse. Let's not focus on that one.
Okay.
But hospitality is important.
Mm-hmm.
Hospitality, I believe, will be essential in the next generations, because if we are going to raise children who reach out to those in need, we must be raising and teaching and educating children who exhibit hospitality, reaching out to those who are left out, those who are on the fringe, those who don't know Jesus, those who are just very different than us. And so we must be entertaining strangers in a safe way.
Yeah.
In a safe way, the way your parents tell you to do, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think there's easy ways for us to be hospitable and show kindness. You can show kindness to anyone and still have good boundaries and still know who who you're talking to or what you need to do in that moment. So just have discernment, like you said.
And for introverted kids who have a hard time making small talk at birthday parties, dinner parties, church functions, things like that, the best practical advice I can give you is to prepare a couple things to say.
Yeah.
Parents can coach their kids on a couple things to say before you get there. If you can have your child who struggles with this aspect, practice saying, "Hi, my name is," or "It's nice to meet you." Mm-hmm. Just those couple things, and practice saying them to where they get comfortable hearing themselves say it. It will give them more confidence when they're faced with that.
Right.
Extroverted kids, who knows what's going to come out of their mouths? This is my son who, you never know. He's going to tell you like anything under the sun. But the third verse, the last verse I think would be good is Psalms 34:4, which talks about, when I sought the Lord, he answered me and delivered me from my fears. Because there are some introverts who do struggle with anxiety because they haven't had the time to think through what they want to say, or they feel pressure to be more like the extroverts and have not been made to feel comfortable with who God made them to be. And that's push them into more fear and anxiety. Yeah. Of course, we all struggle with fear and anxiety, even extroverts.
Right.
That could be a good verse for everyone.
I love those. And I love the idea of talking about it as a family in your devotional time. Or my daughter, she loves to write Bible verses on, index cards or Post-it notes. And I do the same thing. I love Post-it notes. I have them all over my mirror and my desk and, places I'm going to see them often. So I think that's a really good idea. If that's something you do or something you've never tried before, just write down the verse and then have it somewhere where you can read it all the time. It's a good reminder and a good way to help you memorize that verse and remember those things.
Yes. I think scripture being in front of us is such a blessing, especially in a country where we have the freedom to do that, because not every country has that freedom.
Yeah, very true. Well, this has been so good. I've learned a lot, and I've really appreciated your insight on extroverts and introverts and understanding all of that. Before we close out, I always love to ask my guests to share a memory from when they were a kid. So do you have a fun memory you want to share with us today?
Yes. So I was not, as I mentioned, I was not an introvert. I was an extrovert. I was on the other end of the scale, but I was raised by two introverts. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that I was very sensitive to this as a child because I didn't understand exactly. And I loved the spotlight and I thought it was great. When I was baptized, I was 8 years old when I was baptized. Uh-huh. And my dad did the baptism, which was fantastic to have a dad in ministry who could baptize me. But after he baptized me, there was no opportunity for me to speak to this crowd who had gathered to watch me be baptized, which I felt was a gigantic waste of an opportunity for me to make a speech or recite a poem or, do whatever it is that extrovert kids like to do on display. And my father, being much wiser than I, gave me no access to a microphone just to ensure that this didn't occur. And so the only course of action I had was after I came up from being baptized, I looked out to the crowd and smiled and then took a deep breath and dove back under the water. And then dove back up and then swam up to the stairs on the other side, which they completely saw because it was a clear screen. And I think that was maybe the only time in the history of that wonderful church that may have occurred. So
all the introverts right now are just cringing.
yes, and the extroverts are like, why didn't I think of that? Why has no one done that?
That's amazing.
Yes, and I will say that I didn't share this before, but my favorite book about this is The Hidden Gifts of the Introverted Child by Marty Olson Laney. He's also authored The Introvert Advantage, but I like The Hidden Gifts of the Introverted Child because it's about kids in particular. So
yeah, that's a good resource.
That one has been very helpful for me.
Well, thank you for all this information and for all these great stories. I love your baptism story. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. This was a blast.
Let's do it again. I had a good time.
For sure. Okay, best baptism story ever. That was awesome. Wasn't that a great conversation? I learned so much, and I really enjoyed talking about people that are introverted, people that are shy, and how shyness is actually a superpower. People that are shy, people that are introverts have great listening skills. They're thoughtful in what they do. They're cautious. They always want to think about what to say with the biggest impact. That's really important. Something extroverts like me can learn from our introverted friends. It's like that verse in James that says, be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. I love those verses that I need to be reminded of that often, that I need to be quick to listen and slow to speak. And I loved when she said, God did not make us all the same. He made us different, and each of us has a purpose. So good. Well, now it's time for the kids only segment. That is the part of the show where you get to be on the podcast. So I'm excited to introduce you to my friend, Lindsay.
Hi, my name is Lindsay, and I'm going to tell you a joke. Knock, knock. Who's there? I am. I am who? You don't know who you are? Bye.
I love knock, knock jokes. They're just so fun. But I love that knock, knock joke went right along with what we talked about today. That was perfect, Lindsay. Thank you. Do you know who you are? So now you need to know if you are an introvert or an extrovert. That was what Lindsay's joke was all about, right? Well, if you would like to be on the podcast like Lindsay was, I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your favorite Bible verse, or maybe a quote you like, or a story, or maybe you have a great joke that you want to share. Just have a grown-up help you go to my podcast website. It's anchor.fm/collidekidspod. And on that page, there's a place for you to leave me a message. If you need more information about this, you can find all of this on my social media pages as well. I'm on Facebook at the Collide Kids Podcast, or on Instagram at Collide Kids Pod. If you are enjoying this podcast, it would mean so much to me if you would share it with your friends and family. And don't forget to follow and subscribe to this podcast so that new episodes will automatically load each week into whatever podcast app you're using. And give us a rating and a review on your podcast app. That actually does help other people find out about the show so they can listen too. Well, I hope today was a great reminder that our differences are good. You are created in the image of God. God made you the way you are, and whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, nobody else can do what God has made you to do. Well, in case no one has told you today, let me be the first to remind you that God loves you so much. Thanks for listening.
You don't have to go very far looking for bad news because somehow it just finds you. So finding peace in the chaos can be really difficult, but it doesn't have to be because the River mobile app exists. The River is a Christian music radio station dedicated to playing music to help you get through life's toughest moments or life's happiest moments and everywhere in between. And all from artists who love Jesus and are real people just like you. Listening is easy. You can download it wherever you get apps from. Just search 1049 The River or listen online at riverradio.com. And know that The River is proud to partner with the Collide Kids podcast.